Certainly in Jurassic Park III, I feel the tremendous responsibility and pressure to at least come up to the expectations of an audience that have been delivered 2 films with amazing soundtracks. That being done by my friend and mentor, Gary Rydstrom. Basically, how it breaks down is I'll read the script and I'll get a sense of what they're trying to do with the film. Then I meet typically with the director. In this case, Joe Johnston and I got together and we spent the entire day just sort of throwing out ideas, trying to get a sense of where Joe wanted to go. Obviously, in Jurassic Park III, the overwhelming amount of the sound design is dinosaur vocals. I can't tell you how many nights I've laid awake in bed thinking, okay, this is the 3rd Jurassic Park film. How am I going to come up with these vocals that will be fresh and new to the audience and convey the menace and terror of the Spinosaurus, the communicating abilities of the raptor, or the majestic quality of the Pteranodon. When I started this film, I was very fortunate in that I had begun working with a couple of folks that are world-famous field recordists for scientists and nature documentaries and things of that nature, Kathy Turco and Doug Quinn. I knew that they had recorded many different types of animals around the world that I had, in some cases, never even heard of, and that's how I approached Jurassic Park III, to collect as much new and exotic sounds as possible. In the previous ones, there was a lot of zoo recordings. In the case of what Doug and Kathy were able to bring to the table for me, many of these sounds were really created out in the wild. For instance, vulture recordings in Madagascar, that's not something you're going to find in a zoo. Or in the case of Kathy, climbing up on rock cliffs and recording all sorts of Arctic seabirds. There were certainly some recorded at zoos, and specifically to Jurassic Park III, I got in contact with a fellow by the name of Ron Whitfield. He's a well-known big cat breeder, and he has a retired cat's home in the middle of nowhere. We were able to go to his site and record these big lions and tigers, some of which weighed in excess of 300 pounds, which played as a very strong element in the Spinosaurus, for instance. In the case of the Spinosaurus, I would use the low guttural quality of both a lion and an alligator, and I used the sound of a baby bear crying. And then I lengthened a big bird cry that had a raspy quality. It's almost like, you sandwich these together and then you start playing with them back and forth and figuring out how the components go together. The raptors have always played a key part in Jurassic films. And in Jurassic Park III, the story is actually wrapped around the evolution that they've experienced since the inception of Jurassic 1. The raptors have become smarter, if you will, and therefore they've developed forms of communication.
He's calling for help. Come on!
And our characters are pursued by these very intelligent raptors that are communicating over long distances with one another, so that it really puts our actors at a disadvantage. Therefore, it put me in a creative position to really convey this communication. I did that by using these vulture recordings that had these wonderful little staccato sounds. And it's wonderful because when the raptor opens his mouth, you can sort of sense that this whole vocal cord is doing this sort of vibrato type of call. And at the same time, then I bring in the classic hisses that are a signature quality of the raptor. The great thing about this scene is that for a sound guy, for all of us who love this concept of surround sound, these creatures are surrounding the characters, and I can start to use the room so that we really feel as an audience that we're being surrounded, and the sound helps create this sort of tension within the scene. So then the instrument then plays a key role. Alan Grant blows through the skull and makes this sort of long, drawn-out cry that is based upon the same sounds that I use for communication. What I was able to do was I took the raptor cries and I gave the sound a resonant quality. And ironically enough, to me, it sounds like sort of somebody blowing through a kazoo, but it still has that signature quality that we recognize for the raptor communication. I've been waiting to do a Pteranodon for years. I started playing around with all sorts of different types of bird sounds. One is an albatross, and another is a giant petrel. And then I used this little creature that makes this long barking sort of shrill call. Not a bird, but nonetheless sounded very bird-like. So I started playing with the petrel and the albatross recordings and this little creature from Africa, and started blending different versions together and really created this sort of prehistoric cry that you definitely recognize as a bird, but you feel as though it's a big bird and a bird with power. I took a vacation with my family 3 years ago to Hawaii, and I had brought my recorder, and at one point I looked out of the kitchen and I looked in the backyard and I saw all these mongoose fighting one another to get these little scraps of cantaloupe or guava or whatever it was. So I stuck my mics out there and just left the tape recorder rolling, and I started playing with it for the babies, and it worked out perfectly because it has this sort of, it has a baby-like quality, yet it has this sort of ferocious, scattering quality. So that was the key component for the baby Pteranodons. It really worked out well.
With the Pteranodons, Chris would be handling all the vocalizations. You know, he's getting all those big sounds from going out and recording animals or whatever he's doing. And then we're doing more sync specific, which are the wing flaps.
I work with the Foley artists. They'll come up with the sounds, and I'll do my best to interpret what they want from it. I'll use my various devices to improve the sound that she's creating to make it believable to the shot that we see on the screen. The thing about Foley, you've got a Foley artist performing live to the screen. So if the bird takes a big flap and then small fluttery flaps, they can in real time recreate those sounds. So it's really faster and more efficient for a human to watch it on the screen and go ahead and recreate that sound.
We'll create all the footsteps for all the characters that move in a film. That's what we're going to do here. So we're going to create some of the dinosaur footsteps, some of the baby Pteranodon footsteps. If the people are swimming, we'll swim for them. We'll do some of those sound effects.
When we're done recording, we hand those sounds off to a Foley editor who takes all our sounds and cuts them to be perfectly in sync with the picture. Then those sounds are handed off to somebody like Chris Boyes to create what's called the final mix and what's heard, what the audience hears in the theater and then, of course, at home.
This film is definitely going to be driven by two things, sonically. It's going to be driven by music, and it's going to be driven by dinosaur vocals. So the two really have to work in concert with one another.
I had the very good fortune of being recommended by John Williams to score this movie. Mr. Williams was unavailable to score Jurassic Park III because he was scoring AI for Steven Spielberg, who was also producing this movie, so I think he understood that his unavailability was in very good earnest. He was looking for someone who could carry on the tradition from his standpoint. I'm very honored to have picked up that torch, and I hope that I carried it to his satisfaction.
Ready and action!
Essentially, I saw the picture as they were starting to piece it together. I think that the main question starting out was where John Williams' themes were to be used, and there were basically three major moments where everyone agreed that it would be very necessary to bring back the Jurassic Park themes. Two of them involved panoramic shots of the island and dinosaurs, and the third was the ending. there was a new major dinosaur. We all agreed that that dinosaur needed new music. Actually, there's a major sequence in which that dinosaur has a fight with the Tyrannosaurus Rex. It's clearly an homage to King Kong when King Kong fights the Tyrannosaurus Rex. In approaching that scene, I was juxtaposing John Williams' music for the Tyrannosaurus Rex with my music for the Spinosaurus. For the Spinosaurus, I brought in extra tubas and trombones, so there's a very big low end in the brass contingent. And we had 2 sets of timpani drums, which is quite a, one set of timpani drums is quite a sound in itself, but 2 of them really is very overwhelming.
We're not leaving this island without our son.
Then you can go and look for him.
Also, there are new characters. The Bill Macy, Téa Leoni characters, they're making a big personal sacrifice in this movie for their son.
Listen to me. We'll find him.
And I felt there was a pretty strong need for some thematic material that covered the unity of the 3 of them. Téa Leoni and Bill Macy had been split up, and this ordeal brings them back together with their son. So it's kind of a reunification theme. As the audience becomes more and more attuned to what's going on in the movies, I think that the function of music becomes more and more clear. And I think the audience are starting to expect the score to function in a way that, brings them into the movie.
I think given that audiences are now becoming very accustomed to the tremendous visual effects and things of that nature in film, they're at the same time becoming very used to these wonderfully rich soundtracks. And so the expectations just continue to climb for us in the sound field, and we sort of all collectively feel as though we help tell the story with sound.